Hello, it's Jeremy Steele, the Director of Football Strategy for AIK. Wanted to give a brief overview of the work that we've been doing over the last few months. The project, if you want to call it a project, is we called it the Innovation Hub. The idea behind the Innovation Hub is to bring data, to bring insights, to bring as much objective information to the way that the club makes decisions. And hopefully we can give you some really good insight into how the club's been working, how we've started that project. We're in phase one. It's early. So in terms of building these systems, it's going to take some time to make sure that it's embedded in the way that the club works. But so far it's been relatively successful. We'll make some mistakes along the way for sure. Yeah, as we grow and as we build these workflows into the way that the club does things, and especially into the strategy, the vision that the club has, the better we get at it, the more consistent we become, and the better decisions that we make as a club. So would really like to kind of give some insight into that today. Setting up these kind of systems is quite difficult during a transfer window. The pressure's on, things are moving fast, football doesn't wait for anyone. So we've had to kind of do two things at once. So we've had to make sure that the operations are working really effectively, working together with different departments, especially the recruitment department, as we'll show you today. I'm making sure that we're building for the future at the same time. It's all part of a long-term strategy for the club, but the way that we're embedding data into the way that the club works and the way that we are bringing these kind of objective insights is across multiple areas. So we're going to show you those today and explain to you a little bit about kind of 4 different areas. There are lots of other areas that we'll be involved in, but 4 specific areas. The first one is scouting, of course, data-driven scouting, and we can show you today a little bit about how we do that, and give you an insight into the way we use data to scout. The second part is how we use data to recruit, and they're 2 very different things. Recruiting and scouting, 2 different things. Scouting is identifying players, understanding the quality of a player, whether they fit the AIK style of play, the way that we want to develop in the future. Recruitment is around, let's say, due diligence, figuring out whether a player has the potential to improve the team over the long period, whether they are financially viable for us, whether we are paying the right amount for a player, whether we're paying the correct salary, whether the player can have a return on investment for the future. The idea really is to build all of these types of models into the way that we work in terms of the recruitment side as well as the scouting side. And then, of course, there are the areas around reviewing how the club is performing, both on the pitch and off the pitch. So again, monitoring kind of style of play, monitoring how the players are performing over time. So lots of areas that we can show you today, and we're really excited to share. Okay, so the first thing to point out is that we have a vision and strategy document that's been published. I think it's available for everyone to read online. And the idea behind utilizing strategic use of data is really to make sure that we're delivering what we say we want to deliver, and also measuring what we say that we do, so that we know how we're progressing, how we're developing as a club, improving, and in the end winning on the pitch. So this is just one page from the document. You can see there the focus on this particular page is about scouting, the section in red there, and the ambition of the club is to become the #1 club in Scandinavia for data scouting. The idea is again to use data to reduce risk, to improve our chances of finding top talent, to open up the markets that we take players from, that we can investigate on a much bigger scale. We all know that transfers don't always succeed. Players are human beings in the end. But I think the research shows that around 50% of transfers fail. So we're not saying that this is the way to become 100%, but for sure we want to reduce the risk and improve our chances of finding players that fit for AIK, that really are the quality that we're looking for to improve the team in the short term and the long term. So this is just one area of the strategy document that we wanted to focus on immediately because the transfer window was upon us. And so, yeah, we can give you a little bit of insight about how we use data as a club now, together with the scouting team, with Fredrik Visser. So this is the way in which we do this. Now, the first thing to give you an idea of, I'll play a video here, which just gives you a little bit of insight into how we're utilizing Analytics FC and the Transfer Lab algorithm that they call goal difference added. This is the performance model. There are lots of different data models that we're using, but this is the on-pitch model. And essentially, up until now, there are data companies that show you, how many passes, the pass completion rate, how many carries, how many shots. The problem is this is telling you what happened in the past. This is not trying to predict the future or the future performance of a player. There are metrics out there which some of you will know about, things like expected goals and expected assists. These are predictive. They're telling you what the likelihood of something occurring in the future is. But what about all the other actions on the pitch? Through balls, passes, crosses, tackles, headers. And this is where the goal difference added model comes in. So this is what we're using at the club now. So what is it? Basically what the model does is it takes every single action on the pitch and it calculates the probability of your team being the next team to score based on the action, based on the position on the pitch, based on where all the other players are on the pitch, all of these different things that are happening during a game. So for example, here, where the ball is and where this team have possession, the chance of scoring is around 1.7%, so very low. A pass goes into the attacking midfielder, the chance of scoring goes up to 2.6%. So the pass will be deemed pretty positive and the receiving will be pretty positive. As you can see here, the probability of scoring went down. It was a backwards pass, the ball moved further away from goal. Now the player's dribbling with the ball, he punches a pass through a line, the fullbacks come inside to receive. Now we have a 9% chance to score. And here the player plays a little reverse pass into the 7, and the number 7 takes his shot and scores. There was a 12% chance of scoring from that. So basically what we're doing is we're looking at the probabilities of things happening during a game for every single action that happens. And this allows us basically to look at every player in this way. How good are they? Yes, but how good will they be if they continue to play these types of actions over and over again? Because let's say the number 7 doesn't score. Well, the through ball was pretty good. The number 2 making his run inside to receive on the edge of the box was pretty good. And we need to be able to measure all of those different actions rather than just looking at, well, did it end up in a goal or not? So this is how we're looking to assess our players. And like I say, it works across all metrics, defensive as well as attacking. So we can look at how important certain tackles were, how important certain actions were defensively, headers, interceptions, etc., etc. So let me jump into the platform and I can hand over to Fredrik to actually show you specifically a few of the players that we've actually signed in this transfer window as a club, successfully signed. So we can give you an overview of how they looked in the data. What you can see here is Transfer Lab. This is the database that the scouting team at AIK use to identify, to check, to really assess in depth the players that we scout. Of course, there's always a video scouting component. There's always a live scouting component as well. So this isn't the only avenue, but this is the objective data using the algorithm that we showed you there, the goal difference added algorithm. So what we can see down here is when we click manage, this is how we create profiles. And this is really important to us as a club because we have player profiles based on what the club, what the head coach is looking for in players. And so if I click here on a number 8-10 profile, you can see here that we select the profiles that that match what we're looking for in a player. So we have all these metrics. On the right-hand side here, you can see the metrics that have been selected for this particular position. There's physical metrics at the bottom, there's defensive metrics here, there's creative metrics here, and there's goal scoring metrics at the top. There's no need to go too much into depth of these. We have ones for each position, each role within the way that we play. But a good example probably to bring up is one of the players that we signed in this particular window. So if I type in Axel Kwame and we search, we can go over the last 12 months and we can look at him in relation to the profile that we've created for this. Let's compare him against the league that he was in, and now you can see his outputs here. These percentiles on the screen, you can see, are basically the ranking of the player in the level that he's playing. So if someone's in the 94th percentile, it means that they're in the top 6% for that particular metric. So he's in the top 2% for expected assists, top 3% for key passes, top 5% for through balls, in the top 1% for progressive passes. So that's passes that move forward, that are progressing up the pitch. You can see that there are some weaknesses in his game, of course, mostly on the defensive side, which you'd expect from a number 8, number 10. And then some of the physical metrics at the bottom show that he really does fit into the AIK style in terms of intensity, in terms of his ability to get around the pitch. So yeah, let me hand over to Fredrik to kind of go through why Axel was the type of player that we wanted, and then he can also mention a couple of the other signings that we made in this window.
En av de største anledningene til at vi ønsker å være datadrivende jo for at vi skal klare å hitte de underskattede spillerne, altså spillerne som ikke hører hjemme på et lægre nivå, som gjør at vi har en konkurransefordel. Og Axel Kwame representerer jo en sånn type profil. Altså den finske ligaen litt svakere enn den svenske, og i de type kontekster så ser vi etter spillerne som virkelig stikker ut i dataen. Og på et veldig tidlig tidspunkt så stakk han ut. Og det jo et klart insentiv for oss til å undersøke nærmere, til å gå inn i materien, altså representerer den dataen som vi ser, den faktiske spilleren. Og i akkurat den prosessen her så har jo dataen blitt backa opp med uendelig mange timer på video. Vi har vært og sett han 2 ganger, vi har pratet med ham, vi har fått klart å bygge hele bildet da, av spilleren Axel Kwame. Og det jo en del av altså, prosessen vår for å bli mer suksessfull på transfermarknaden. Og det vi helt avhengig av, om vi skal treffe mer riktig enn tidligere. Hvorfor vi akkurat går for Axel jo at vi har tidlig identifiert et behov av spillere med kreativitet. Spillere som kan gjøre noe på egen hånd. Og særlig da ser vi på for eksempel dribbles plus, carries, progressive short passing. Altså hvor stor grad klarer han å hote baklinjen til motstanderen. Både på egen hånd, men også relasjonelt. Og der var, og Axel i en særklasse. Når vi ser på profiler på lægre nivå som stikker ut, så kan det jo være hensiktsmessig å ta fram en annen profil, som vi også hentet nå i somras, Adrian. Som med sin direktehet, sitt konstante hot mot motstanderens baklinje, virkelig har har sprengt skalaen i ettan. Nå det jo så at vi kjente Adrian sen innan, men dataen gjør oss säkrere på at det vi ser og det inntrykket vi har faktisk representativt for spilleren. Så det fungerer begge veier. Altså det kan være dataen som et første insentiv for å gjøre en større jobb på spilleren. Eller så kan dataen være med å pushe oss i retning av at vi, ok, her må vi gjøre en bedre jobb på spilleren for å forstå, altså hva det vi ikke ser. Og med tanke på Adrian så det særlig dette med disse dribbles plus, og så klart en høy expected goals, touches in the box, touches in the final third, som klare indikasjoner på at han kommer seg inn der man kan gjøre mål. Og det sammen med det vi faktisk ser på video, det vi faktisk ser live, det vi kjenner til han fra innan, det gjør jo at vi blir mye tryggere i en beslutning i å ta en spiller fra en lægre kontekst og inn i vår, og tro at det kan fly. Så det litt sånn om vi skal klare å slå over vår egen vektklasse, om vi skal klare å treffe på disse, kall det undervurderte spillerne i markedet, så kanskje dataunderlaget en veldig viktig del av det. Men så det jo ikke bare på spillere inn, hvor jeg bruker Transfer Lab, og hvor jeg bruker dataprofilene. Det jo også på våre utlån av spillere for å se hvordan går det egentlig for han. Altså ja, vi får ukentlige rapporter, jeg kan se matchene, men i den konteksten de utlån av de, altså hvordan går det. Og da kan det være et eksempel å dra Wilmer Olofsson, som nå på utlån i ettan. Og som dere ser, gjør det veldig skarpt. Altså, han jo i grunnen en midtback, men har blitt brukt mye som venstreback der, og som vi ser tydelig, altså pushe grensene på ganske mange kritiske metrics. Noe som en indikasjon på at dette en spiller som ikke hører hjemme på nivået han Og det jo det som essensielt. Altså, om vi skal hente spillere fra lægre nivåer, så må det være spillere som har ett nivå, 2 nivåer inne. Så det underletter vårt arbeid ekstremt, og det gjør oss sikrere i valgene vi gjør rent operasjonelt. Så for meg, altså i min hverdag og ukentlig, så det gjør alt mye mer effektivt. Det gjør at vi kan scoute i mange flere markeder. Det gjør at vi kan være sikrere i beslutningene våre, og det gjør forhåpentligvis også at vi treffer rettere oftere enn tidligere.
So the next part of the vision and strategy document that really we're utilizing the data for us to really support the process and to support how we measure things and do things is this kind of due diligence process in terms of recruitment. Essentially what we want to do as a club is win on the pitch as well as off the pitch. And to do that, I think utilizing the data to help us to really measure players, really find the value, assess everything both on the pitch and off the pitch. That's the real basis of utilizing the data for this kind of due diligence process, these kind of dossiers that we create when we're looking to sign a player. So I'll give you a couple of examples that are really quite data-driven. They're quite advanced in actual fact. There aren't many clubs in the world that will be looking at things in this way. So I've covered up the information about the player. It doesn't really matter who the player is in this case. But the idea here is that we're looking at the probability of where the team might finish in the league, and then looking at the impact the player can have on that. So in this particular case, this was very early on in the transfer window, but the player here in this particular example is projected to improve the team's chances of finishing second, really improve the team's chances of finishing third. At that particular moment in time, the team was projected to finish in fourth. Of course, we're now in third with a lot less time of the season to go, which is really, really positive. So the idea here is to look at the impact of a player upon the probability of the team doing well on the pitch. How does the player help the win probability? So this is, again, a really interesting use of data where you're taking their on-pitch performances, you're putting them inside the team, and then you're simulating how that impacts the performance on the pitch. As I say, it's quite an advanced way to utilize the data, but certainly a very, very impactful one. So this is one way. The second way here is age curves. So it's taking into account the position of the player, the current performance of the player on the pitch, the league that they're playing in. And you can see on the right-hand side here, from top to bottom, the very dark green is the elite level in Allsvenskan. So we're looking to project how the player will perform in Allsvenskan over time. Now, of course, this particular player is showing a very high level, and a level that is projected to be at the top level, elite being a player who's in the top 1, 2, or 3 in the league in terms of their position. A top player would be a player, who would perform well in the league, good being a player that would perform okay, and then average and below average are players that we probably wouldn't consider, probably wouldn't go through this process. So yeah, again, looking to project forward about where the player can be over time, because again, future performance of the player is a big part of the strategy, and utilizing this type of data can really help us. And of course, as I say, we want to win on the pitch. We also want to win off the pitch, because that helps us to let's say, dominate the market over time. At the moment, we're not in that position. We're trying to get there as a club, and the way that we'll get there is by being really excellent in terms of understanding how a player is going to develop, how they'll develop in terms of their value to us on the pitch. And of course, there are different profiles of player, right? There are older players, there are younger players, but we always have to go through this process of figuring out how a player might provide some value in the future. So what we do is this kind of approach. So we utilize the data we have our own player valuation model. That model is then projected forward over time. In an optimistic scenario, optimistic meaning he plays every game, he's a starting 11 player, and that he develops really rather well. Median, which is a kind of, if he plays some games, most games maybe, over time and kind of develops in an okay way. And then you've got the pessimistic scenario. Maybe that's a player that doesn't play very often, maybe gets injured early on, what happens in that case. So you can see that with young players, especially, the margin of error is quite big. The difference between a player having a pessimistic output and an optimistic one, and the difference in value is quite big. But obviously we then need to come up with a return on investment number. And in this particular case, we're looking at 12 months, 24 months, and 36 months in terms of the net return. So the net return meaning after transfer fees, after agents' fees, after the sell-on fee that we put into the deal. So these are all the things that we're thinking about and utilizing the data to give us information, so that when we present this to the management team, to the board, that we have a very, very clear idea of financially how this is going to impact the club in the long term. As I say, the idea is that if we do this well as the scouting part, if we do the recruitment part well, then we can dominate for years to come, rather than spending money on players that potentially don't have a return on investment or don't have an impact on the pitch. So it's the combination of the two. So to give you an idea of how the model works, this is a player valuation model. It's very, very difficult to build player valuation models. Analytics FC have this player valuation model, which takes into account age, takes into account the scenario of the player, which league the player is coming from, and also the league of the buying club. So for example, if AIK were to sign a player from a small league, that player immediately coming into our environment after 1 year, that player's value is already higher because they're playing in a higher league, they're playing at a higher level. So the model takes into account everything. Once you have that, building into that these scenarios, this pessimistic, median, optimistic, again, you're having to do a lot of research on what does a certain number of minutes mean for a player. So you take a 17-year-old player, an 18-year-old player who gets 500 minutes on the pitch. Suddenly their value shoots up. If a player plays under 21s football, even a minimum of like 2 matches at under 21s can really increase the value of a player. For example, playing European games. So playing even the qualification rounds of Europe, you play 200, 300 minutes, suddenly a player's value changes. So again, taking all of these factors into account and the real kind of in-depth research that goes behind a model like this can really support the club when they're making decisions about where a player might be, predicting kind of the future value of a player. Now, of course, this is football, right? So things happen in players' lives, things happen where a player may or may not perform at the levels that you're expecting. But if you're taking all of that background research into account, then at least, and this is why we have the scenarios, at least we're taking those things into account about, whether a player plays minutes, doesn't play minutes, gets injured early, plays every minute of every game. We can take all of those things into account and really help ourselves to predict this kind of future financial return, which is really important for us as a club. It's the model that we have. It's the idea of investing in younger talent, developing them over time, as well as the older talent as well. And we need to measure that. If an older player comes in at 28, 29 years old, we also need to know what their valuation is, both at the time of buying and at the time of potentially selling in the future. The other thing to add here is, of course, it gives us as a club, utilizing these types of models, it tells us how much we should be spending on players and what kind of salary levels we should be paying as well. So I think the model can be important not only for projecting the future of where a player might sit and the net return on investment, but also giving us an idea of the levels that a player is worth now, the value of them right now. And then finally, in the document, there's a very clear kind of guideline on the style of the club, the on-pitch identity, let's say. And you can see here that the key components of that are quite clearly outlined. Now the tactics on the pitch, that's different. But the kind of overall identity of how the team should look is kind of clearly outlined. Now, of course, getting to this ideal state is not only tough, but is a process. It's a step-by-step process. And at the moment, the development to get there is on its way. It's a work in progress. And we can see that through the data. And it's something that, again, we're able to monitor over time. I won't go into the kind of in-depth KPIs for all of this kind of thing, but we can show you an overview. This is the league as it is. It's important to see the style of play in a context. So you can see in the middle there, the red zone is over the last 5 years is the most played style. And in different leagues, that's different. So in some leagues, you'll see it's more direct. In some other leagues, you'll see that it's more slow build-up. But as you can see there, this is some of the coaches that are in the league right now. I won't go through too much detail there. You can see them on the screen, but you've got obviously Häcken, Hammarby, and Malmö down here in this kind of full control zone. That's their style. That's their identity. That's what they want to do. Now, whether they're hitting their targets or not, that's completely down to them. That's how football works, right? Every club will do things their own way and have their own style. However, we have our own way. The white area there is the target, I guess, the ideal way. That reflects what's in the document. And our aim is, of course, to reach to reach there. But you can see the journey that the team's been on over time. And it's been a relatively difficult one, really, in terms of hitting that ideal style. So we've gone from Andreas Alm a few years ago. We've moved into this kind of pragmatic style in the middle where we kind of chop and change, trying to move into that full control zone. Brandström went through this kind of deep build-up phase where attempting to play a style of play where we kept possession, trying to build up. And then, of course, with Henning, it was actually the furthest away that we'd been from the style. Now, it's not to say that these styles of play in any one of these areas can't be successful, but you can see here the definitions. Park the bus, of course, is an area that we don't want to be in, particularly. It's a low block, long ball kind of style. Bait the press is still a low block, but attempting to try and play. Full control is your kind of, I don't know, Bielsa, Guardiola style, if you want to call it that. And direct domination is your kind of Red Bull. I suppose Jurgen Klopp when he was at Dortmund and in the opening years at Liverpool. And this is where we're trying to get to, is this kind of overlap between direct domination and full control, this kind of high-speed attacking football that we want to play, with some kind of domination in the final third in terms of keeping teams in there, high press, high regain, trying to counter press when teams regain the ball off us. But yeah, so this kind of real high-intensity football. And you can see that the development from where we were to where we are now, with Mitchell in here, has been positive. Now, of course, there's still a journey to make to get into where we need to be. But the development, certainly out of possession, has been very positive indeed. And you can see here the percentages. What these percentages indicate is the similarity between different styles. So Alm to Norling, then all the way through to Brandström to Henning, Henning into Mitchell, and you can see that was the least similar. So Henning being the furthest away from our ideal. And right now, in terms of the similarity between Mitchell and the ideal style here, we're up to around about 77%. So, of course, we want this to be on target in the final area. But this is where the Analytics FC models can really help us to measure and to monitor. The actual KPIs that go into it can differ for sure, but the idea is to be able to know what we're doing, how we're doing, and it also impacts the work that we do in terms of recruitment. It impacts the work that we do in terms of the due diligence that we talked about, in terms of squad planning, in terms of all these things, because we need to give Mitchell the tools that he needs to be able to deliver the style. And obviously, if we don't know what those numbers are and what the style of play is that we currently are delivering to where we need to be, then we can't help. So this is where Analytics FC really comes in. These models are, it's called a coach ID. These models really are about identifying the kind of coach styles and then being able to utilize those to really drive the strategic focus of the club, both in terms of, as I say, in terms of recruitment and also to support the coaching staff as well. Hopefully that gave you an insight into the way that Analytics FC and AIK are working together to utilize data to support the strategy, to help the club in terms of both achieving its goals and achieving its targets, but also measuring the process. I think that's the biggest thing, is we're trying to build processes here over time that really kind of integrate the data into what we do and how we do it. And yeah, without that, you're kind of a little bit lost. If you don't have a measurement of how you're doing, how do you know that you're achieving your aims and your targets? So as I say, the idea is to utilize that data to dominate both on the pitch and off the pitch. Yeah, we're at phase 1. So it's really at the start of the process. Phase 2 will start to integrate data into other areas of how we work. But for now, hopefully you've had a a good insight into what we're trying to achieve and the steps that we've taken. And hopefully we can give you an update in the coming months as to what we're up to next.